So, to continue with the retrospective reviews, I wanted to follow up the Hellraiser review with its sequel, Hellbound Hellraiser 2. Clive Barker returned to his cinematic world of Hellraiser, the adaptation of his novel, The Hellbound Heart, with Hellbound, a story he wrote but didn't direct to the screen. He was, however, executive producer on the project and had significant input and respect with direction. The lucky person to take over Clive Barker's cult classic in the directorial chair was in fact Tony Randall, a man who wouldn't actually do an awful lot after this project, despite Hellbound being regarded as possibly the best of the Hellraiser movies, which his directing style would of course be part of the reason. Its story is influenced by the questions we were left wondering after the first movie, Hellraiser. It also expands the movie universe of the Cenobites further and further, opening up the world and mythos just that bit more. First to mention is the opening scene. It has the mystique known to us from the first installment. We see what we learn to be Elliot Spencer, the man who became Pinhead, playing with the puzzle box, eerie music, and then the body horror. Not to be mistaken for gratuitous torture porn. The opening scene is important as it sets up a story for further down the line. After the scene-setting intro, we are thrown right into the main story. Moments after the ending of the original, Kirsty is in the Channard Institute, a mental institution, being questioned by a detective. We learn who Channard is from a beautifully written scene with some great dialogue as he is performing surgery on a patient, discussing the labyrinth of the mind and its secrets to be unlocked, like a puzzle. All of these themes are drawn heavily from the concept of the dimension where the Cenobites come from and the means by which they are summoned, the labyrinth and the puzzle box. The Cenobites are not the only evil presence in this movie. Dr. Channard, the head of the Institute, is also a sinister and much more earthly evil floating around. The whole idea of the second movie being based first and foremost in a mental institution lends itself so well for some incredibly written scenes. It also plays on people's inherent fear of these old institutions and the horrors that used to occur there, of which Channard is actively participating in, which we learn from the basement, his own private clinic it would seem. This is a movie that incorporates some flashbacks, not overly in your face, but it's a good reference point to those who perhaps hadn't seen the first. The flashbacks do make sense though. They are told through Kirsty as she divulges information about her ordeal to Dr. Channard, which, all things considered, is actually a really good way to do flashback in film. Interestingly, we learn that the other evil presence, Channard, has somewhat of an obsession with hell, apparently completely aware of what Kirsty was talking about. The lament configuration, the labyrinth, the Cenobites. His own personal museum of artifacts are discovered when his trainee breaks into his home and begins snooping around. It's also the scene that kicks off the whole reintroduction of Julia and Hell and the Cenobites in general. We get this incredibly tense scene where Channard leads a patient that clearly is hallucinating maggots on his flesh constantly, gives him a cutthroat razor and lets him do his best to cut them from his own skin. This he naturally does on the mattress that Julia died on in the first film, leading to her resurrection. What is such a standout in this scene to me though is just how uncomfortable yet curious Channard appears here. He's apprehensive about what he's doing, but his conviction is there, and more importantly, so is his desire. It's also a scene that gives us the incredible practical effects and prosthetics this movie is known for. Julia comes through the mattress as a mutilated version of her former self, skinned and bloody. But all things considered, this is an effect that I would argue still holds up somewhat today. This is a time before CG was so relied upon in film and where practical was a must for the budget. And we ended up with something great. Sure, you can pick holes in it here and there, but overall it's an effect that I think looks superb, quite believable, and is in a part and part what Hellraiser is all about. The pacing of this film works. It's a little under 2 hours, being that it is 1 hour 40, but the first 40 minutes moves along at a great pace, slowly building relationships between characters and expanding on the mythos with the obsession that Channard has. It's not a quick pace by any means, but it moves along and it does so with intensity and atmosphere that keeps you engaged and gripped in the story. But the moment that 50-minute mark hits, the Cenobites are summoned and we get the incredible quote started. Pinhead, ever the quotable and menacing evil. No, it is not hands that call us, it is desire. Again, sealing Doug Bradley forever as the Pinhead. He does such an incredible performance in this role, and it really is a performance. He has such gravitas and presence. The subtle way he says his lines and moves through his scenes are so powerful whilst also being understated. It is all of this that I argue has made Pinhead one of the best all-time horror entities. Once hell is opened, here is where we learn about the Labyrinth. Not so much through spoken word, but what is shown. Each individual that enters the domain of the Cenobites experiences something different, lending itself nicely to the notion of personal hells. Your own experience is unique and singular when you die. We do get some dialogue from Pinhead though, which elaborates on the fact someone's personal hell makes them apparently unreachable, ending in one of the franchise's best quotes: "We have eternity to know your flesh." This is of course as Kirsty is running off down in the winding pathways of the Labyrinth. An expansion to the mythos that is welcomed and quite special, I think. It adds a lot to the world, the universe, and in general gives the Cenobites that bit more depth into what they do. The Labyrinth itself and the Leviathan, I don't think anyone quite expected what we got on screen at the time. What a beautifully unique and horrifying depiction of hell. We see the Leviathan for the first time. We learn who is the lord of this place the Cenobites call home. The god of hunger and flesh, Leviathan. As designs go, a floating diamond in the sky is perhaps one of the more unique out there, but it isn't that which makes it interesting and special in my eyes. To me, it's the build-up. The low hum of Morse code beaming from the floating lord in the sky. The fact that when Chenard says "my God" at what he sees, that we get a monologue from Julia claiming this is who she serves in this world and Earth's. This is her God. It's also the mystique behind it. Nothing ever is really explained about what this being is. This entity that reigns over one of the hells, commands the extra-dimensional beings, Cenobites, and craves to inflict pain and suffering on those that desire it. The unexplained is always better than ruining the mystery, and that paired with how unique this supposed god is what makes it an all-time favourite of mine. One of the standouts from this movie is in fact the music. The acting isn't incredible, no, it's good, but the music actually assists in propping up those moments that may be slightly wooden, allowing the emotion to come through just that bit more and doing those subtle interactions much more justice. Going off from that though, it is worth noting and reinforcing that I don't think the acting is bad at all. This is one of my favourite horror movies of all time. It's just pretty undeniable that the acting in some scenes is a little off. I could go on and on about what I love about this film, but all in all, it's important to recognise what it did at the time of release and the type of production it went through, all leading up to a movie that I love, obviously, and that many others love and enjoy too. Hellbound had a production budget rumoured to be roughly $3 million, a mild step up from the original entry to the franchise. Its opening weekend proved a success. It took just over $3 million and overall grossed over $11 million during its time in theatres in the US. This, of course, adding another financial success, technically, to the Hellraiser series. Interestingly enough, it was met with the same sort of response the first one had received, though some of the comments surrounding an incoherent plot, to me, seem like nonsense. There is numerous visual cues throughout the movie, which then get worked on and developed, culminating in the third act. The plot is consistent in universe and makes sense. I'd argue those that stated this simply didn't watch the movie or drank too much of the complimentary drinks on offer during their screening. Currently, though it is widely regarded as the best in the series, it only has 48% on Rotten Tomatoes, whereas the first entry is sitting at 66%, which, without a doubt, the first should be praised, and it is an excellent film, my favourite actually, but the way the second opens up the universe wider, without explaining too much, I feel was never regarded enough as it should have been by critics. Overall, I love this film. The pacing is solid, steady, but solid. The sets are a product of their time, but I feel they hold up, and the practical effects are still to this day impressive. The score is what bolsters everything together into an eerie, sadomasochistic horror flick, questioning religion and the nature of pain. It is a highly recommended watch if you haven't already. But what do you guys think of Hellbound Hellraiser 2? Do any of your thoughts echo mine here, or are you completely the other way on this? As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, so please do let me know down below in the comment section. And if you did enjoy this video, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more reviews in the future. If you think this video is worth it and you want to support me, the channel, and what I do, then please head on over to my Patreon page. The link is in the description box. I've been Mr. H, and until next time, I'll catch you in the comments section.